Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. You know who I am. I am Dr. Maiysha, your host, and I am very excited for this episode today. So, my guest today, he is a new friend and a fast friend, and we have so much in common. We have so many common values. But, I'm excited about this conversation because this guest of mine, who is in an organizational development, an organizational psychologist, excuse me, we have so many things in common when we first talked, and I was immediately drawn to his perspective. And so we're going to be talking today about connection in the workplace, the four principles of connection with Jason Cochran. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Maiysha, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today and talk about some things that are really passionate, but also top of mind of things that are
Yes.
going on in the workplace right now and the work
Oh
that
my
you're doing too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I really love for my guests to get like related to the people who come in dialogue with me. So would you mind just formally sharing who you are, what you do, your organization, and how you came to really get into this space?
Sure thing. First thing to know about me, everything that I do in life revolves around this why. My
Mm,
why is about creating healthier connections between people and work. And here's why I care about that why. Growing up, for me, most of the adults in my life, they didn't have a good work experience.
mm,
Work was simply viewed as something you showed up and you did because you just had to put food on the table.
mm.
In other words, you dealt with it, you managed it because you had to just to provide for your essentials.
That's
There
right.
weren't any adults in my life, unfortunately, my sisters, my aunts, my uncles, cousins, parents, anyone who said, you know what? If we hit the lottery, I'd still show up on Monday because I'm so passionate about what I do and the people that I'm working with. I didn't have anybody in my life like that. And so for me, that's why this why is so important is because when I look through those lenses, it all makes sense to me now why I struggled to understand what I wanted to major in college. Because
Mm,
here's what was going on in my head, Maisha. It's like, wait, all the adults that I know, they go to college and then they go do something they don't want to do just so they can pay for
mm,
stuff that they don't need. And so I'm
mhm,
like, why am I hopping into the rat race here to do things that don't necessarily spark a fire in me? And
mhm.
so that's why it took me a while to figure out exactly, quote unquote, what I wanted to be when
Yeah.
I grew up. And it wasn't
Mhm,
until I took some time in psychology classes to really unpack a lot of that
mhm,
that I understood a big part of my why from a vocation perspective.
mhm,
I want to help prevent what happened to a lot of the adults in my life when I was a kid.
mhm.
I want more people to get a sense of fulfillment,
Yeah.
of purpose, of well being, that work delivers so much value to their life beyond simply the money to be able to
Mm,
purchase things and do things. I want it to be something that nurtures their spirit, right? And so for me, that meant becoming an organizational psychologist and trying to figure out this puzzle of
yes.
something that we think is really simple work. But
Yeah.
when we start to really unravel it, we start to understand how intertwined it is in our life and our well
Mhm,
being and our
mhm,
relationships. And of course, you've seen the research before that's, states many times your manager at work has more of an effect on your health and the
mhm.
determinants of your health and the trajectory of your life than your spouse can.
That's right.
Right. And that's crazy when you think about that. So that's a long story short of saying everything that I do and everything that I'm passionate about when it comes to the work I do is about creating these healthier connections between people and work.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's so interesting because as you shared your experience growing up and watching the adults in your life go to work because they had to go to work, and I'm going to make an assumption here that you are of the similar generation as I am. I'm a Gen X.
I'm in that micro generation. That's right. I'm in that
Yeah.
micro generation. They call it the Zennials
Oh, the
that kind
Zennials.
of
Yeah.
the Zennials. Yep. So I'm an old millennial or a
Uh-huh.
super young Gen Xer, however you want to look at it. That bleed over period from like
Yes.
79 to 82.
Yes. Yeah. My sister is would be in that. Sometimes I think sometimes they even call them Y, Generation Y. Like that's
Yep.
another
That's
micro.
right.
That's another name. Yes. So we have a similar experience. Like, and that's I think the beauty of our generation is that I think we have had that we've seen one way and we've awakened in our journeys to say, well, does it really have to be this way? Like, why is it this way? And we question the norm. And I think that for many people leads us into these careers. For some, it's first career. for many of us, like in my case, it's second career. But as you shared about taking psychology courses as a pre-med student, I was originally a chemistry major. And I did it because that's what people who were pre-med did. They were either biology majors or chemistry majors or physics majors or something like that. But then I took my first psychology class and I was like, what is this thing right here? And it led me on this path to deciding to move in this direction. And of course, full circle is the rest. But I appreciate that context, and it just reminds me of the similarities and why how we got connected. So, to share what your organization and what you do inside of your organization, and then I would literally love to dive into this connection in the workplace.
You got it. Absolutely. So, what I do as an organizational psychologist has come along, and Four Principles of Connection is something that I designed. So, it's proprietary of what we do at
Mhm,
my company, to Loss, that I helped found. But it's
mhm,
all about thinking through human centered design thinking of how do
mhm.
we design the work experience for people?
Yeah.
Because historically, here's what we've run up against, it was the opposite. Work was designed for a few to
Mhm.
drive profit, but it
Mhm.
wasn't designed with the people who are actually delivering the value and doing the work many
Mhm.
times
Mhm.
without that input. And like you mentioned, kind of the shakeup with COVID that happened 4 years ago, it got a lot of people off of the rat wheel to be like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Could this be done a better way?
Correct.
And fundamentally, that shift in more people all at the same time questioning work, what am I doing? What is this providing for me other than just a paycheck? It all happened across the world, not just the United States, but across
Yeah.
the whole world at the same time. And I
Yeah.
think that's what started to really move the needle, and a lot more leaders saying, you know what? We need to start looking more beyond just talking about culture, beyond just
Mhm.
talking about our values.
Mhm.
We need to start understanding, are there some scientific principles here, design thinking of how we've gone about going to market with products and services to understand consumers?
Yeah.
Can we take a lot of that same science and methodology and rigor and understanding our first consumer, which are our internal stakeholders, the folks
Mhm.
who are deciding every day whether or not they're showing up to
That's
work
right.
and do the job, right? That's who you've got to satisfy and support first, are those folks. And the only way that you can do that appropriately is by understanding them and their needs, how they're
Yeah.
wired, how to set them up for success, and understanding that each person is a unique individual and
Right.
may have some different needs than another. And so, in that sense, a lot of the work I do now in businesses draws on some of my initial work when I first got out of college, was working with schools. A lot of it was
Mm.
working with school superintendents, so K through two
Mhm.
schools, working with
Mhm.
superintendents, principals, parents, teachers. How do we create healthy school cultures? Well, you know what would often happen, Maisha? You get a bunch of adults talking about culture in the room, and who wasn't in the room represented?
The students. Mhm.
We're talking about all kinds of, and it's, you look around and you're like, wait a minute. I think the students play a big part in culture.
Mhm.
Well, I
Right.
think the same thing has happened in business. The analogy there is, for too long in business, it was just executives, it was just shareholders, those with more the traditional quote unquote power in the
Right.
organizations
Mhm.
that would say, okay, this is how we want to do it, without making sure that there are seats at the table representing everyone in the organization that
That's right.
makes it up and is delivering value. And I
Mhm.
think that's been the fundamental shift that we've seen, is to start applying more of these human centered design approaches to understanding, how do we recruit? Who are we looking for? What are the skills that we need? Then,
Mhm.
once they're in, how do we onboard? Beyond just orientation, how do we make sure that we're really nurturing and caring for this person to set them up for success,
Right.
especially over the first year in the organization? How are we doing quote unquote performance management? How are we doing learning and development? How are we doing offboarding? How are we
Mhm.
doing employee recognition?
Yeah.
So, all of those different touch points now, instead of them just being a checklist item that we traditionally did in
Mhm.
HR,
Mhm.
now we're starting to think more deeply about those and applying more of those design principles of, no, let's start to unravel this and think about the journey someone
Yeah.
has when they begin here at this organization, who they are,
Yeah.
and how do we try to construct and match that journey and the type of experiences for that person to maximize their growth and their development. Because fundamentally, it's the right thing to do, right? It's the
Absolutely.
human thing to do.
That's right.
But then it just so happens, when you do that, then it equips people to be able to strive, to be able to think creatively, to be
Mhm.
able to solve and tackle hard challenges and problems. All
Yeah.
the things that organizations have to be able to do for the organization to advance, it all starts at that base level of making sure that you're providing well for your people and what they need.
As I listen to, like, all of that as you're dropping these, I love these gems that you're dropping. One of the things that also occurs to me is that it creates a level of safety. When you are designing the experience, the employee experience, and you're taking such care at each step of the way, it creates trust from the employee to the organization, and it creates a level of safety. And what that does is exactly what you said. It increases the level of creativity because we know there's the four stages of psychological safety. First is inclusion safety. So, of course, if you're taking this kind of care and the onboarding and the learning and development, then people feel included. Then they feel safe to learn, safe to make mistakes, right? So they're feeling safe to learn and make mistakes and then safe to contribute. Then they're going to contribute their genius, their individual geniuses, which is to the benefit of the organization of the whole. And then there is that challenger safety. So like that fulfills the need to make things better. And so if they can come in and they want to make things better, if there's something that's not quite working, they feel like if they have been taken care of in this way, if the relationships have been nurtured, if there's connection and trust, then they feel like they can own that part of it in making things better. So I really love the way you talk about what you do in terms of nurturing the journey from the time that they, that they're signing a contract or even before that to create that trust from that time all the way to the end of that journey, whatever that looks like. That's really great.
That's so insightful. And it all comes back to trust, as you said, Maiysha. Everything in life comes back to trust.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, whether it's work, personal, it has to do with trust. And you can't pour from an empty cup,
Mm, that's right.
right? You just can't. And for too long, we've had a lot of people trying to pour from an empty cup, trying to get them to care about work when they
Mhm.
don't know whether or not work cares about them.
That's
Like
right.
I often say, you know what? One of the happiest things in life that can happen to a human being is when they work somewhere that
Mhm.
cares about their 5 to 9 as much as their
Mhm.
9 to 5. And that's the truth. But the way that you build trust as an organization and leaders, it's not by saying, hey, you should trust us, come on board. No, you got to pour into them first. Somebody's got to go
Yeah.
first, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's got to
You
go
know,
first. It's not
it's
like,
so
hey,
funny that
yeah,
you say
you
that.
checked out our website.
Yep.
Yeah, trust us. No, you got to earn it. You got to,
Yes.
just like in any relationship, you got to earn it.
Mhm. That's
And
right.
the way that you earn it, I have found, is by making sure that you're being thoughtful about the design of the work experience for your
Yeah.
people.
That's right.
That's one of the best gifts that you can give them. Don't be thinking in terms of like gift cards or hey, we need to go get the keg. People want to be able to drink beer at work. Hey, if you have data that's saying above and beyond, this is what people need in order
Mhm.
for fulfillment and purpose to be fulfilled in their heart and deliver
Mhm.
their best work, then okay. But most of the time, it's just cheap little shiny toys to be able to
Yeah.
throw out there and think that that's
Mhm.
going to satiate people.
That's
But
right.
the truth is, there are four different types of connection
Yeah.
that are essential between people and work in order for there to be value delivered for the person
Mhm.
and for the organization.
Let's talk about it. Let's go.
Let's
You
go.
you were like you read my mind. I was just about to bridge us there, but we're already
You
right
got
there.
it. We're synced up.
So
We're synced up. I know it. We're connected here. And so here's what those four are. Here's what I discovered. And this came from doing interviews,
Mhm.
interview research, qualitative research with top level executives and companies a year after COVID hit. So 2021.
Okay.
And as we started to go through and do a sort through the data, there were four themes that were critically important
Mhm.
in the organization to connect people in the right ways. And here's
Mhm.
what they are. Number one, we got to design work experiences that connect people with themselves. Number two, work has to be designed to connect people with others. Number three, work has to be designed to connect people with their ideal roles. And then number four, work has to be designed to connect people to the organization,
Yeah,
something bigger than themselves.
that's right.
Now, here's what I found. Typically, when we use the word connection, the connotation, and this is most of us in every regular day life, when we think of connection, we think about connection to others. social connection. We get
Yeah.
that. We understand how important that is, how loneliness, isolation, all of those things that kind of came from COVID, they're not good.
Mhm.
They're not good for your health. But what we have often missed are those other three connections that are
Mhm.
critically important. And that is making sure that work is designed to help someone connect with themselves, understand themselves on a deeper level. So,
Mhm.
developing more self awareness, the things that they're good at, the things that they aren't, with
Yeah.
an ideal role. How do I want to apply these things? And just
Mm.
because I might be good at something doesn't mean that's what gives me energy or I
Yeah.
want to do it. And then, fourthly, always having the bigger picture in mind.
Yeah.
So, not getting so lost in your work that it's just monotonous,
Mhm.
that you're thinking about the reason I'm doing this is because of XYZ. And those are the types of things when we think about human centered design. How do we design onboarding? How do we design learning and development? How do we design performance management? Those are the filters through which we need to think about, are we hitting in each of those four areas, each of those
Mhm.
four types of connection in the
Mhm.
way that we do these touch points with our people in the
Yeah.
employee life cycle? That's what it really boils down to. And so when we think about employee engagement, a lot of these terms that get thrown around, culture, they can
Mhm.
often be hard to define. What I love about four principles of connection is we're talking about four very specific design principles
Yeah.
that are really clear, that
Mhm.
are essential to human need. And
Mhm.
they also are essential to the needs of the organization to
Mhm.
drive work and deliver value moving forward.
Mhm.
And so that's a little background on where the framework came from and how it's something that I have found useful and many organizations have found it useful to not only design those different types of interactions they have with their people,
Mhm.
but also I've heard incredible stories like this one where it's what's used whenever someone is raising their hand and saying, I'm struggling here at work, but I
Yeah.
don't know how to explain it. And that the
Mhm.
framework is like, it's this, it's
Yeah.
connection to role. This is why I'm not feeling my best here at work. Let's dig into
Yeah.
this a little bit more. So it's got a lot of powerful use cases inside organizations for making sure we're designing work in the right way for people in the organization.
It's interesting as I was listening to the four principles, one of the things that just came to mind was values. Like the really getting clear about what's important to you in the context of these four principles to be able to make those connections. Initially, when you said connecting to oneself, because I think a lot of times when we're looking to the outside, we're looking to the society that maybe not to tell us, but we're being inundated with society's values and what society's priorities and roles, our family, our communities, and oftentimes that's how we end up in the jobs and the careers that we end up. I can't tell you how many times when I was doing individual coaching work with other physicians and healthcare professionals, when I asked them, why do you do what you do? They would say things like, because someone told me that I would be a good doctor, or I should be a doctor, or because I was good in science, somebody told me I should do this, or because my father was, or because my mother was, like legacy industry
Mm,
people. And so that connection to self is so pivotal because you might find in the connection to self that the person is not ideally connected to their role. In the values themselves, you find out, oh, this is not important to me. This is important to me. And then they discover that they're not in their ideal role. So I think that's just so, it was one of the things that just like was very loud for me. Like, oh, yeah, when you're connecting with stuff, you got to figure out, well, what's important to you. That's like the first step. What's important to you? And then get that aligned and then begin to utilize that as the jump off point for connecting into the ideal role. I think connecting between people, that is somewhat of a skill set that needs to be retaught, if you will.
mm, absolutely, it does.
Yes, yes.
Let's go.
Establish.
Let's go back to your point on connection to self. You dropped some really important nuggets there. Sadly, and I'm going to admit this, and this is sad to admit as a psychologist. On top of it, I don't think I really knew who I was until I was around 40.
Yeah.
So I fell in that same bucket, man. You're talking about people that were like legacy work. It's like, well, my family member did this, so I'm going to try and do that. When I was trying to figure out when undergrad, okay, what
Mhm,
am I going to major in?
mhm,
I tried chemistry because there were some biochemists in the family.
Mhm.
Thought about pharmacy because there were some pharmacists in the family, accounting,
Mhm.
engineers.
Mhm.
Nothing was clicking for me.
Mhm.
Not
Mhm.
like cognitively on a level, I understood it. I
Of
could
course.
do it, but was it a passion? Was it
Right.
giving me any kind of value beyond just learning new information? Not really. And
Correct.
then I took that first psychology class and was like, okay, here we go. This
Mhm.
is it.
Mhm.
And so I fell in that bucket too. And then it took me a while to figure out how I wanted to apply psychology in life. Like I said,
Mhm.
started off working in schools, working on school culture. That was
Mhm.
fine for a while, but then I found out from a true value based perspective, the things that I want to do is help create better connections between people and work, not just in schools. And so I went through this path, like you just described, of having to unlearn certain
Mhm.
things that were just part of who I was growing
Yeah.
up. They weren't bad things that I learned,
Mhm.
but it took me a while to figure out what I wanted for my life. And I had to sit down and do some serious work. And one of the things you mentioned that I had to do to help clear up connection self, I
Mhm.
needed to know what my personal values were. And it needed to be more than just like, hey, here's 5 words that resonate with me. It's like, no, they've got to mean something. They've got to be
Mhm.
gutsy.
Mhm.
They've got to be unique. They've got to
Mhm.
be in my words, the way that I talk, because it becomes part of your inner dialogue of how you
Yeah.
talk to yourself. Right.
Yeah.
And it's what you use, whether you want to call it your conscience or whatever. That
Mhm.
self talk is what guides you to help you understand what are your hell yeses and what are your hell nos that you're
Yeah.
going to say to in life and what
Yeah.
guides you. And it took me way too long to invest the time and energy to create those. And here's the crazy thing, once I went through an actual process that's proven on
Mhm.
how to develop good, strong values personally,
Yeah.
guess how much time it took, Maisha? How much time it took to develop those?
How much?
It took like less than 4 hours. So, yeah. So, I mean,
Snap.
in the grand scheme of things, it's like 4 hours isn't a lot, but it's one of those things. Can you take the time to pause? Can you go through some very simple exercises, but proven exercises that help you understand what's important to you and speak to you and get those really clear when it comes to behavior and choices? And once you do that, then it makes it really clear in terms of the types of organizations, the types of work that you want to contribute toward. If you
Yeah.
skip that first step, and I love that you called it the first step, connection to self. If
Mhm.
you skip that and you move on to, well, I just want to be connected with others or just with an
Mhm.
ideal role, I'm telling you, eventually there's going to be incongruence. There's going to be some conflict of some kind internally because you aren't sure of who you are and what you're looking for.
That's right.
And so please invest the 4 hours of your life to get your core values straight, get
Yeah.
them clear, because that will be like your absolute compass to help you
Mhm.
understand then and put into perspective the organizational values, the organizational type of work that aligns with that. And it'll help you stay away from the things that should be hell knows for you that
Yeah.
don't do that and stay out of
Yeah.
those traps.
Absolutely. And you're alluding to it like the personal core values. And when you get these core values, they will hit you. Like I'm a person that has grown up mostly in my head, but I have learned to be in my body. These are the ones you will feel in your body, and they will impact your connection to others. Because if you're not connected to your core values, who you will connect with and how you connect with them will not be congruent. It'll impact your role and it'll impact the organization. Seen it time and time again, as you have. And so I want to just piggyback on what you said in terms of when you spend that time, you will feel it in your body. It will feel aligned and congruent in your mind and in your body. So, like for me, one of my top core values is integrity. Doing what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it. And if you're not going to do it, communicating that you're not going to do it and making a new promise, like really being aligned and congruent. That's a very high value for me. And I can feel it in my body when it's out. Connecting, like being connected with others, although I am a tested introvert, but I love
I like
people.
that.
Yes. Um, I love people. So that is being connected, family, super high value. So like these are values though that I feel in my I'm gonna use I feel in my soul, because for lack of a better word, like I feel it deep in my body. And so when those values are not aligned, it manifests in the body, it manifests in the well-being. And one of the things that being incongruent or misaligned with your values does is it impacts your well-being over time, and the impact of not being connected in these four ways that you talked about, the impact is burnout. The impact is mental unwellness, anxiety, depression. Like there's an impact to that. And so it's just it's really I really love these four principles that you this framework that you have designed. And you're right, like people you could go straight to that when a person is feeling burned out in their role, when they're not feeling happy in their role, when they're feeling discontent. You can go to those four things like, okay, where are you not feeling connected with yourself, with others, with your role, or with the organization? And then you can problem solve from there. Yeah. I do think though, and I'll come back and this is probably a whole nother podcast, whole nother conversation, but I do think with when it comes to connecting with others, I think that we're facing a skill issue, but we're also facing an empathy battle right now.
Mm,
And that's just coming from my social justice hat, just looking at things that are going on in the world, and people can be very stuck in their binary thinking, me versus them or us versus them type of thinking. And that I think the it's been going on for longer than probably most people would like to admit or acknowledge, but the pandemic amplified that. So one of the things I think is important in that second principle is equipping people with the tools to reconnect. Of course, reconnecting with yourself, but also reconnecting with others. Like, how do you do that in a way that feels safe? Because if there's no safety in the organization, and we talk about trust, and trust and safety are integral, but they also can exist independently. A person can have trust in the organization, but cannot feel safe in their environment based on the people around them. So if there's not that safety in the organization, people are not going to connect. So then that has to be addressed too inside of that principle. Like, what is the source of the disconnection between people? And so I just think it's again, the framework is brilliant. And I appreciate that you have taken the time to create that framework because it is it's just really solid for evidence-based things that you can look at in an organization that will lead you to what needs to be done next. And I venture to say that because I love to do this happens in organizations, but you can apply this in your household to families. Because if you think about it, because I always like to people who are in organizations, and there's people who are like, what if I'm not in an organization? Well, you can just map this on to your family unit. Because if you
mm,
think about
hmm.
families are an organization, they're an organized unit. And so if you're not connected to yourself, how can you effectively connect with the people in your social circle or your family circle? And then how can you be connected with your role? Have you discussed that? If you're not connected with each other, what are the roles that we're playing in our family? And then connected to the organization or the family unit as a whole. There's the whole thing around people who feel like they're what do you call it? The child that's like the middle child syndrome, always left out. I'm choosing my language wisely. The person
Right.
who, right? There's all kinds of different sayings, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to use that saying. I'm not going to use that saying. That's why you hear me stuttering a little bit. But yeah, like the odd person out, right? In the family. So if they're not, if person doesn't feel connected to the family unit, well, what's that all about? So I just think that as I'm talking with the audience, as the audience is listening, I want them to be able to understand that this is more than just if you're in an organization. It's brilliant for organizations, and it maps on to any organized unit of people.
That's right. That's right. Health. In order to have healthy organization, we've got to have healthy people.
That's right.
Now, Maiysha, to what you said there, I want to take a step back because there may be some leaders, and it's
Hmm.
okay if it's the case,
Hmm.
maybe wondering, is this still really important? Maybe scoff at the idea of like how important this stuff is. Because I do.
Mm.
I come across some leaders that are still like,
Yeah.
this is still some of that touchy feely stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone's just got to put their big girl and big boy pants on and show up to work and
Mm.
get stuff done. Here's what I want folks to hear. This isn't just the two of us talking about this
That's
and
right.
saying how important it is. 2 years ago, coming up this October,
Mhm.
It will be the 2-year anniversary of the Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy,
Mhm.
rolling out the mental health in the workplace model
Mhm.
from the federal government.
Yes.
This has become such an issue since 2020 in terms of
Mhm.
people's well-being and
Mhm.
work
Mhm.
that it's hit epidemiological levels where there's so much concern that the organizations at the federal government level that are looking and poring over all these data of the number of people that are needing and wanting therapy, which
Yeah,
absolutely, if you need it, you need to go do it.
that's
But
right.
the rise in the number of folks that are unable to cope with the
Mhm.
toxic stress, unhealthy work cultures has
Mhm.
risen to such a level that 2 years ago, coming up this October, that the federal government said we need to put a model out there to help
Mhm.
support organizations and leaders in understanding what are the foundational principles of what it takes
Right.
to have a workplace that isn't toxic, isn't getting people sick. And that's why this is important. This isn't just the folks that have been talking about culture for so long. We're now getting to the point where we're seeing the realized costs of people's lives, of it affecting
Mhm.
families, of it
Mhm.
putting strains on institutional supports that we have in place that's beyond capacity
Mhm.
because we've allowed for so long our workplaces to be way too loose when it
Right.
comes to how we treated people.
That's right.
And we're now seeing a correction in that. We're now seeing there be more conscious capitalism of how
Mhm.
we run our organizations, of how we treat our people. And that's why this is so critically important. And real quickly, I want to go back to the personal values because I do have mine. I've got mine right here
Mhm.
in a little image. So I'll hold this up here.
I
If we
love
do have the
it.
video, this
Yes,
is
we
mine right
do.
here.
Yes,
Awesome.
I love it.
So these are mine real quick. I'm going to hold this off to the side where everybody can see it and maybe I can talk also. Believe the best. That's one of my core values.
Mhm.
Believe the best means I approach every single human being that I meet with the
Mhm.
best intentions. I believe
Mhm.
they have the best in mind. I don't think anyone wakes up any day and says, you know what? I just want to make some bad choices today. I think everybody wants to
Mhm.
do well and to feel well.
Yeah.
Platinum rule. It's not
Mhm.
about how I want to be treated, it's about how they want to be treated. So that's
Mhm.
different from the golden rule, right? Treat
Yeah.
others how you want to be treated. No, I
Yeah.
believe in treat others the way they want to be treated. And I
That's
need
the
to
original
understand what
rule.
that is.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely. Better way. That's just a reminder to me. I'm never satisfied with just doing things the same old way. Status quo.
Mhm.
Things change. People change. World
Mhm.
change. I need to keep
Mhm.
up and I need to
Mhm.
constantly explore better ways for me to be better, but
Mhm.
also to do work in a better way also.
Mhm.
Stand out, as you see on there, is a good
Yep.
reminder for me to not just fit in.
Yeah. Oh,
No, I was not put on this earth to
right.
just be another person. I was not put on this earth to be Maiysha Claiborne. You were.
That's right.
I
That's
was put
right.
on this earth to be Jason Cochran.
That's
And
right.
it's just a reminder to me, don't just act in a way to just fit in.
Yeah.
It's important to stand out. I need to
That's
be
right.
who I am.
Mm.
Make the connection.
Mhm.
We're talking about connections today, right?
That's
Make the
right.
connection is about helping organizations understand connections, but also helping connect people together that I know that can help each other and help
Mhm.
solve really challenging problems. And lastly, there at the top, overall harmony. I don't believe, at least for me, I
Mhm.
don't believe that there's such a thing as life work balance.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Rarely is it a 50-50 thing, right?
Never.
It's going to ebb and flow. But what I want to feel in life is harmony. I
Yes.
wanna feel like these things are integrated well and they flow together and they feed
Yeah.
off of one another.
That's right.
And so I feel overall harmony whenever I'm living out those values and I
Mhm.
make sure the type of work I'm doing, the type of work I'm doing with other people, that
Yes.
I'm connecting in those types of ways around those values. So I just wanted to share those really quickly because I think sometimes when we talk about connection to self, when we talk about values, a lot of people can still be like, well, I don't really understand what that is.
Mhm.
What is that exactly? Well, for me, it means it's a picture that connects all of my values together.
Mhm.
It's some gutsy words that are unique to me. And
Yes.
then there's a very short description with it that I know by heart. And those are the things that stick with me and are
Yeah.
part of my DNA in
Mhm.
all the decisions that I make and the way that I go about interacting with other people.
Yes.
That's why that's one activity and work experience design element that really helps connect people with themselves. And it's
Mhm.
why it's an important first step before we ever expect them to be connected at work.
That's right. I
As one of
love
my
that.
friends, Zach Mercurio, put it at the University of Colorado State, he says, work won't matter to someone unless they feel like they matter first.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And this is what all this is about is you got to get to know people, understand where they're at, show them that they matter, and then what? That project will matter to them.
Mhm.
Going the extra mile will matter to them, but we've
Mhm.
got to show mattering first to other people, and a big part of that is helping them understand who they are,
That's
because it
right.
also helps you then as a leader and a teammate understand what's important to that person. That helps you interact with and support them in the right ways, and vice versa when they know that about you.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. A fun story when you said stand out, that definitely hit too, because with me and my son are always having this conversation about being weird on purpose. And I was listening to one of our kids, our mutual kids podcast, and they were talking about the original meaning of weird being a uniqueness, something special,
I
uniqueness.
love that.
And so when we heard it, I was like, see, that's why we need to be weird on purpose. So when you said
I
stand
love
out,
that.
it made me think of that story. But I love those values. I love those values. And it just goes to show like when we connect with what's important to us at a very deep level, and we choose that language that really resonates with our minds and with our bodies, that feels congruent for us. And I love that you created a visual. So for those of you who are listening, we do have a version of the podcast as the video version on YouTube. And you can go and you can search this title on the YouTube podcast, and you could see this beautiful graphic that Jason held up at this time. And we'll make sure we highlight the minute of it as well in the YouTube so they can see it. But I think it's just so important for you to find that way, that whatever modality works for you, to be able to connect with those core values, to find that way. And by the way, I just to backtrack to what you said about resistance, leaders resisting, is this touchy feely woo stuff. This also has an impact on their pocketbooks as well. And I can share from the healthcare side that there's an estimation that if nurses and doctors continue to leave medicine at the rate that they are, that within the next less than 10 years, I think it was 2033, there will not be enough healthcare professionals to take care of patients. I am turning
Wow.
50. I am turning 50 in April. And I will only be 59, 60 when that happens. That's crazy,
It
right?
is.
And the biggest impact is going to be, so the workforce shortages are real. When people are not satisfied, when they're not well, when had a colleague who posted on LinkedIn, who she's a burnout coach, who talked about a physician who passed away in their home eating dinner because
Wow.
they were burned out. So when you have this happening, these shortages are going to happen one way or another. People are going to leave. People are going to be calling out. They're going to be sick. They're going to be taking sabbaticals, or they're going to die. And I know that feels extreme to say, but it's what's happening. So for the leaders out there who are resistant, you're just not going to have enough people to work for you anyway. And it's going to impact, and it costs 10 times more to replace people than to just invest the money in the design that improves the overall connection. You're going to save money by doing this touchy feely woo woo work.
That's
Right?
right. That's right.
So I just had to like put that in because that resistance can be, for some people, it can live as real, but you have to see it from all of these different perspectives on the bigger picture of how it impacts the organization. And it's just the right thing to do.
That's right. It is the right thing to do. And going back to the US Surgeon General coming up on 2 years of them putting out this model, this is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is that they're looking at the data and they're saying, we're not going to have enough healthcare workers to take care of the number of folks who need to
Hmm.
go to the hospitals or who need care. We're not going to have the number of psychologists.
That's right.
And so it's like we've got to be thinking more proactively about prevention. And we know, if not the leading cause, one of the top two leading causes from a social determinant of health perspective is work,
Hmm.
because we spend a third of our life at work. Another third
Hmm.
of it is spent sleeping. The other third is
Hmm.
spent doing our other stuff. But when you break it down like that, like one third of your entire life
Yeah.
is spent working. That's why this is so important that we design it the right way.
Yes.
is because, and that's why it's risen all the way to the level of the Department of Health and Human Services getting
That's right.
involved and saying this is reaching some really scary levels of the number of people that are missing work, that are reporting being
Mhm,
sick, that are burned out,
mhm,
that are developing mental health conditions due to
mhm,
toxic work cultures.
mhm.
This is why now it's risen to this level, is because, to your point, we're now seeing if everyone's starting to feel unwell, do we have the number of caregivers that can help them get better? We've got to start thinking about prevention, just like we do for physical health.
That's right.
Thinking about here are the things you need to be doing. I can't just be sitting around in my office and expect myself to get healthier. You got to
Mhm.
get out and you got to do the right things. And
That's
that's what
right.
we got away from in work is
Yeah.
for too long we treated humans as resources, as
Mhm.
cogs.
That's right.
We got away from a healthy form of capitalism. And
Mhm.
now what we're doing is we're recalibrating. We're getting
Yeah.
back to conscious capitalism. We're taking care of our people
Yeah.
and we're understanding that this is a you problem. You just go
Yeah.
access
Right.
therapy or the other supports that you like.
No.
You got skin in the game, so to speak,
That's right.
organizations. You need
Mhm.
to step up and you need to improve the working environment and using these type of design principles to make sure you're connecting people and work
Right.
in the right way
Right.
to help them, but also to help us as a functioning society
That's
to
right.
make sure that we're well and that
That's
we're
right.
doing well and that
Mhm.
we're advancing instead of going backward
Yes.
as a society. So that's why these things are all important. It's not just you
Yeah.
and me
That's
talking
right.
about it. Now, we've got folks at the highest level of federal government saying, this is getting real, folks. And we're
That's
going to
right.
have some consequences if we don't start
Mhm.
getting the ship turned around.
That's right.
So that's what we're doing now, is
Yeah.
getting it
Yeah.
turned around.
Yes. Woo! Well, I knew this conversation was gonna get good. I knew it was gonna get good, and I knew it was gonna get juicy, and this was such a meaningful conversation. Lots of pearls dropped. So appreciate you. And so before I wrap it up, I want you to let people know who are listening how they can follow your podcast, get in touch with you if they want you to speak, if they want to bring you into their organizations. What is the best way for them to connect with you?
Thank you for that, Maiysha. Best way is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn.
Me
And
too.
it's super simple, right? 'Cause almost everybody's got a LinkedIn account of some kind. Look up Jason D as a dog Cochran, Cochran. I
Mhm.
believe I'm the only one. I don't have to have on the URL unique profiles. Sometimes folks they may have to have like a string
Yes,
of like 5 numbers after it.
right.
I think I've just got the Jason D. Cochran. Must be the only one that's on LinkedIn.
All
So
right.
it's pretty simple. Jason D. Cochran. Connect with me on LinkedIn or give me a follow. And absolutely, that's the best way to stay in contact with the things I'm doing. If there's ever ways that I can be of service and support you and your organizations in creating healthier connections between people and work.
Awesome. 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 We will have all of Jason's information in the show notes. And I just want to thank you again for coming on the show, for cultivating this amazing conversations, very transformational, in my opinion, conversation. And I definitely look forward to having future conversations. I think probably could have gone on for another 20, 30 minutes. So I think we're going to be due for part two for sure.
You got it. Thanks for the opportunity and keep connecting, everybody.
Excellent, excellent. So you know where to find me if you want to get in touch with me for any reason, speaking, if you're wanting to do any of the coach training, you can reach me at mindremappingacademy.com. You know that. Also, listeners, share this episode. Share with a friend, share with a colleague, share with a family member, because it is so important to connect, to have this connection in the workplace, and to be able to understand these four principles of connection. All right. So share this episode with someone in your life. I say at least three people. You could do that. That's pretty easy. And don't forget to leave a comment. When you listen to this episode, you find it meaningful, leave us some feedback because it helps others to know that come behind you the meaningful conversations that we're having on this podcast. And finally, hit that subscribe button because we're having conversations like this all the time. So, with that, I bid you adieu. I thank the listeners for listening. Without the listeners, there is no podcast. Y'all have a great rest of the week. And until we see you again, stay empowered.